intense words, to put it mildly, and one would perhaps ask or question, well, what's the deal with the bowel and the bladder? What's that about? And I think we can come to a fairly quick assessment of what that's about.
Body archetypes are very powerful, and they have a tendency to come through above and before all other archetypes, except in rare conditions in our work.
All right. Let me go on and finish this paragraph. This, again, is from Part 6 of the current Alta report. The data includes imagery for, quote, thundering shock heard across the world, end quote. Further, we have, quote, alarm and, quote, release of forces from control. You can spell out of control, I think. As well as, quote, knocking knees and, quote, fainting and, quote, falling over. All of the patterns of the accretion of the aspect attribute sets within the supporting layers are favoring a view of, quote, suppression, which is, quote, breaking loose in such a way as to, quote, cascade around the planet. This, quote, large noise shock let loose by the, quote, breaking fracturing of the, quote, control system is indicated by market entity movement in December to be the kind of event that just keeps rolling along in spite of all efforts, quote, to, quote, push back. Let me string the words again for you. Thundering shock heard across the world, alarm, release of forces from control, knocking knees, fainting, falling over, suppression, breaking loose, cascade around the planet, large noise shock, breaking, fracturing, control system. And again, we'll just keep rolling along in spite of all, quote, efforts to, quote, push back. That's some grim stuff.
Isn't it, though? The only perhaps saving grace to the whole thing is that it's within the markets entity, and so it may only be focused on the commercial aspect of things and may be archetypes for what will be an economic shock. Now, we also have to say that we have data indicating that, as everybody's aware of, and as a lot of people are very frightened of, the potential exists for the Israelis or someone of their ilk to do something very stupid and cause a problem.
Big mistake.
And this language could be read, especially in conjunction with the markets entity, of a planet where our economic system is extremely brittle and fragile at the moment, and a single attack by a rogue state would set off a chain of events which not only would have military repercussions, but would instantly cascade the largest planetary economic collapse that anybody could conceive of, because such an attack instantly divides the planet into warring sub-factions. And there's no longer globalization as we know it, and with no reserve dollar, poof, there you go.
Instant side choosing, and that's it.
That's all they have to do. They don't have to go to war or anything. They would just have to choose sides.
Polarize. Well, divide and conquer, right?
Exactly.
Same old, same old. All right, here's the next graph from Part 6. A surprising subset of the newly processed immediacy data is centered around the idea of, quote, fishes seeking to escape from the net, end quote. This, quote, attempt to flee, end quote, is indicated to, quote, induce a panic. Thought we had seen that, but apparently not. The bespoke, quote, panic aspect attribute subset is supported by such descriptors as, quote, destructive forces and, quote, vomiting losses. The, quote, panic subset includes details that clearly focus on the bailout or attempt to rescue the global paper debt-based financial system by pumping it, quote, full of yet more money paper debt, end quote, as being, quote, beyond the realization of the difficulty, end quote. This is further supported by the, quote, difficulty is, quote, so large and unique that, quote, without previous experience, it, quote, cannot be grasped. Say George and Cliff. Too bad none of us have been through anything like this before. Now, let me read the key words again in this paragraph. All right? Just the key words that they've come back with Clif's software by scouring the net of well over 100 million reads of forums, of websites, of blogs, you name it. All right, here are the key words. Fishes seeking to escape from the net. Attempt to flee. Induce a panic. Panic. Destructive forces. Vomiting losses. Panic. Beyond the realization of the difficulty. Difficulty. So large/unique. Without previous experience. Cannot be grasped. I think that tells a story. And then from those words you can see how George and Cliff weave their narrative, suggesting where we are going. These words are extraordinary. And again, in most cases, they're tied to subsets and date frame references, which make them a little easier to string together. But this is not a totally subjective, off-the-cuff kind of we think it's going to...
No, and in fact, just the other day we had a very nice compliment because on one of the forums out there devoted to linguistics, some people in the semantic search engine business acknowledge that we're probably 10 years ahead of where they are, and they've got a crew of over 300 people involved.
Wow. Well, that is an amazing compliment and well-deserved.
Or it's a proof that you can't solve a problem by throwing money and programmers at it.
Yeah, well, it's that too. I remember the first time I came across your work, I contacted you two almost immediately. This has got to. I've been following the work of Dean Radin and I guess Princeton and all the non-local collective unconscious people for years and years and remote viewing, and this is so logical and so crucial that people understand that we are all connected to a oneness, and that's where this is coming from. All right, we'll be right back with Clif High. Okay, I'm back with Clif High. Let me revisit that last paragraph again. I've taken these out of sequence. They're excerpts. I'm going to go with the last couple sentences. This is further supported that the difficulty is so large and unique that without previous experience it cannot be grasped. Too bad none of us have been through anything like this before. Okay, now we'll go on. And what do I want to do? How about this, Cliff? How about if I go through this one and just put the words out there, the actual...
Well, I would say we can discuss it at a broader level if you want to. I mean, some of the things are that when we throw words out, for instance, we get into situations that can come back and bite us because we get an archetype of lockdown. So we knew some months back that, for instance, the lockdown in the area you're discussing in markets would show up. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, being silly humans, we also found an association with officialdom, and so we thought, well, maybe officialdom would be instituting the lockdown. And what really had occurred, as we all know now, is that there's been a lock-up or a lockdown of the credit markets, and officialdom is attempting to pry it open. So there's where the narrative can fail. Officialdom is certainly involved in the markets very heavily at the moment, and we're also dealing with a lockdown. But our narrative, which we started describing back in November of 2007, had it a little bit reversed because, of course, we're on the paranoid side here, and so we think, officialdom's going to lock down the market. So we have to be careful about the words, and we also need to let people know that these are mere paragraphs within pages and pages and pages that give a huge narrative around all of this stuff. So these are specific words, and they're rather frightening in their. Well, actually, I have to admit, the whole thing taken is probably pretty frightening on its own.
Very much so, and we're not here to do that, but this is your research and your data, and we're presenting it. What I'm trying to do is to help people understand how you do this, and I'm going to do this this next one. I'm just going
leave the narrative part out.
I will. I'm just going to do the words, then I'll go back and read it as you have sewn it together. Or sutured it together. It sounds like a big automobile wreck here.
Yeah.
Okay, here are the words from the next paragraph. These are the words that Clif's software has brought back, and they find to be of note and relevant and intrinsically woven into what we're experiencing now or about to experience. Sorcerers and witches, pundits and reputed experts, technocrats, consulted, large numbers, reforms, proffered, attempts, find out what works, officialdom, daily engaged, worse, rigid, stiff system, danger, rigidity, breaks, cracks in the system, cracks, system, critical, at a critical juncture, rung, ringing system out of bad habits, visible, death of the dollar. 3 days. Renunciation, wringing out of the bad habits.